It is coming to you live from London. It's your honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd, product guy, joined by Juan Cicada. Hey, Juan.
Tim, how are you doing?
I'm great.
5 years. I am Juan Cicada, principal scientist at Data World, and excited to celebrate our 5 years today. And also to have Rebecca O'Kill, who is the Chief Data Analytics Officer at AXIS Capital. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So before we kick off, I want to share a special announcement. And our friends, if you remember one of our former podcast guests, Ugo Bohn Anderson, he's an independent AI and data scientist at Vanishing Gradients. So he was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago or a month ago. He just dropped a new episode on his podcast, High Signal, with the one and only Fei Li. They're going to be talking about rise of foundation models, what human-centered AI means in real systems like elder care and education, and why spatial intelligence might be the next big shift beyond LLM. So there's a lot of stuff that is in that podcast. Definitely worth to check out. And I think we're really excited that we're going to, and this is all about the community we're building here. So yeah, happy to share all the shout outs for all the cool episodes and also all our guests who were just doing awesome stuff. So with that, definitely listen to that podcast. But hey, let's kick it off. What are we drinking? What are we toasting for today?
So this drink is called the Bucks Fizz.
That's right.
Also known as a mimosa.
Yeah, I guess it's also a mimosa.
Which actually is surprising that we've never had a mimosa.
So what is the Bucks Fizz background? It's like, so it's been called Bucks Fizz for a while, but then there was like a pop band named after it that won the Eurovision prize.
That's right. Yes.
In the 1980s, in the 80s.
Something like that. Yeah.
So it's this week in the Eurovision.
It is, which is a really big event in the British calendar, even though we never win.
Anyways, so
except for that year when they won.
Right. So here we go.
Yeah.
So cheers
to 5 years. And we've been at the Gartner Data Analytics Conference, which actually Rebecca, you spoke, which was awesome, and just great company.
And great Eurovision this weekend.
And to Eurovision.
And to everybody.
Good luck to the UK.
All right, so our warm-up question is that, given that this is our 5-year anniversary, what is something that you've done consistently for 5 years, or that you should have been doing consistently for 5 years? I don't know, putting you on the spot.
Yeah, that is a very tricky one. 5 years is a very, very long time to have been doing something consistently. There's a lot of things that I wish I was to do consistently for 5 years. A big one is stretching. So I'm a runner, and I should stretch more than I do, and I probably would have prevented a lot of injuries if I had done that. So that's something I aim to do, and I do not do a very good job of.
All right, I've been still thinking about this one, and that is something that I'm going to steal that one too. Like I have been getting better at stretching, especially when I travel. I think now that I think about it, I should be consistently exercising almost every day, which I don't do. But the stretching is kind of like, let's lower the bar a little bit. That's actually something that is achievable, but you're not doing it.
Yeah, you can do that every day.
That is.
Right? I would say the thing that I haven't been doing for 5 years consistently is running. I should. I used to run a lot. The thing that I have been doing consistently for the last 5 years is showing up about 3 minutes late to all my Zoom meetings. So sorry, everyone.
That is true. All right. Well, let's kick it off. So today we're going to be discussing about also the takeaways in Gartner. But first of all, we're going to talk about the conversation we had at Gartner, which was, what's the honest no BS question here is, how do you make governance the enablement for AI? Yeah. The incentive enables AI.
Yes. Yeah. It's a really good question, and it's something that we've been trying to crack at AXIS, primarily because, governance generally has a very bad reputation, and nobody has any real interest in doing data governance. And my history, not just at AXIS, but other places I've worked, is that you give somebody the title of a data steward, and they want to run mild because they have no real interest in carrying out what they perceive to be a very dull role. I've spent a lot of time trying to think about how we can make governance effective, because ultimately governance is such an important thing that we need to have in place in order for us to be able to deliver the great things that the business actually needs, and that the business are going to get excited about. So with that premise in mind, it becomes quite easy to think through, hang on a second, If that's the case, then we should be able to use the exciting things that the business needs and the business wants to incentivize them to do the things that they don't want to do, because it's a direct enabler of the thing that they want. So perhaps our messaging is wrong when we go to the business and say, hey guys, we need you to do data governance activities, and they run a mile. Perhaps we need to say, right, hey guys, you want this wonderful, beautiful, shiny thing that's going to make your life easier. In order to have that, we need something from you. And that is for you to play a role in looking after data, in enabling data, and therefore you need to essentially be one of our data people and do some stewarding.
Because now you're part of the actual outcome that you want to achieve, and now like, okay, yeah, I have to stretch every day, I gotta run every day, right? Like, and now like you're like, but I know that it's because I want to be fit and I want to be healthy and I want to be able to run a triathlon.
I feel that we're going to start with this metaphor of stretching and exercising, going through here and eating our vegetables. So we'll see how this goes. but we talk a lot about how governance and enablement, and I think how the rebranding of governance to enablement are both. But I think at this point, I have the impression, like, when we go off to conferences and everybody, people are now realizing the governance for the compliance and make sure bad things don't happen, and governance, which is really for the enablement of doing that. So this is something I feel that people are now starting to talk about. Now the question is, the rubber hits the road, how we're going to go do that. So I'm curious if you can like share like some examples of like how you are actually seeing this. Like, what are particular examples of what is the carrot? I mean, what is the type of cool AI thing that you're dangling in front of people, and how are they actually getting into it? What are the stuff that they have to go do? And they're like, this dull thing actually became exciting.
Yeah. So there's a few examples of that that we've been working through. So the first thing is, we're relatively early on in our AI journey, and we started out, I think, like most people have, in terms of kind of building out some initial use cases and getting the business to kind of see it and test it and touch it and use it to support their kind of day-to-day working lives. And one of the first things that we did was we thought that we could support some of our underwriting teams. So one of the type of business that we write, generally, what happens is the underwriter receives a big kind of submission, so a big thing that needs insuring, and with that there will be a really large document, potentially hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents that they then have to read through to say, right, do we think that we want to insure this thing? And in order to insure this thing, what terms do we need to put in place? How much do we want to charge? And all of that stuff. Now that is a incredibly manual exercise, because they've got hundreds of pages of documents that they have to go through. This felt like a really, really good opportunity for us to utilize AI, because essentially you can just put a chatbot over the top. They can ask questions of it. It brings back the answers. Boom, everyone's happy. And it helps them to become much more efficient. It also stops them from missing important pieces of information that are hidden within the document. So we started there, and no surprises. Everyone thought, oh, this is really good. We like this. But then they started asking questions like, well, actually, what else would be really interesting? It would be really interesting if, when we're looking at this particular document, we could find out not only what's in this document, but also where there are other things in our kind of structured data universe that relate to this particular submission, this request for insurance, that's relevant to it, that might help us to make better decisions again, or to do things differently, or to basically leverage the information that we have more broadly across the organization. So that's, it's obviously a really good idea, but in order to do that, you need to have well-governed data, structured data, to then go forth and start leveraging. And so there's an additional step that needs to happen before we can actually start to deliver that. And that step is to put governance around our structured data. But you've got the sell then, you've got the ask, because those are the same people that can then go and say, we define customer like this, or we define insured like this, or we define industry in this way. So you've got the ear of the people that can then actually help play those roles.
So a trend that I'm seeing, I think, is kind of clear, that a lot of the chatbots and all this AI, the RAG stuff is happening is with unstructured, with text and documents. And so it seems like, the low-hanging fruit is to get into text. And how much of governance happens at the beginning with, if you're doing your application more on text, versus let's get that out there and get people excited, and then that's already the first carrot, and I want more of this, or hey, this stuff is great, but then they realize, and So I'm wondering, like, how much of the governance do you do up front for the unstructured for text versus let them go do that and then kind of bring it in later?
So it's the give them something that they can start to imagine the possibilities with. And you can do that bit without necessarily having much governance, because, like you say, it's the unstructured piece. And then you can almost use them to help imagine what the next steps will be. They become part of the solution. They become kind of co-creators with you in that. And then by doing so, when you then ask them to give you a bit of governance back in order to get it, they're already so bought in, because it's kind of almost their imaginings, their creation. They're really excited about it. And we found that to be, quite an effective way in.
That makes a lot of sense.
Is it so? Almost like a lightning round question here, but would you say that that the first AI app they want to go do is very little to no governance and get that out first, or you have some, or what is the level of governance for that first kind of thing out?
Well, I'd say it should be minimal governance for maximum value. So I would say that everything that you do, you should be looking to ensure that it is going to actually
provide the value.
Provide the value. Yeah, exactly. Give them something that they want, something that is going to make their lives easier or better in some way or another. And if you can do that with no governance, brilliant. That's the way you should go. If you need a little bit of governance, then go for the minimum.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about MVPs, minimum viable products, or minimum valuable products. Sometimes people switch the viable to valuable. There's kind of like a minimum valuable governance.
Yeah, MVG.
Right?
Yeah.
What's the minimum amount that we need to put in place that allows us to achieve this? And actually, with this example you gave, the sort of chat experience on top of our underwriting, it seems like probably the amount of governance that was needed to unlock that first use case was actually probably pretty light, just in terms of who's able to access that and who you can enable with that. Of course, as you start to get into structured data and things like that, it requires maybe a little bit more of a governance apparatus, but that was probably great from a low-hanging fruit standpoint.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I'd say the kind of key ingredients for success are, minimum governance, a clear value proposition, and then engaged recipients. So you want to have stakeholders that are up for it as well.
For minimum valuable governance, what are some of the biggest dimensions that you think about when you're trying to, for any given project, when you kind of look at that and you break that down, are you thinking about, data access, you're thinking about enabling people, what are some of the dimensions that you're thinking about when there's a project kicking off and you're like, hey, I need to do, I guess what we're calling minimum valuable governance on it. What are some of the different dimensions you think about?
In terms of governance dimensions?
Yeah.
So I would say that you want to go for something where the kind of the data pieces within it are, the definitions are really clear and obvious. So something where there isn't ambiguity about what the subject matter and the stuff within it is. And what other things? I mean, I think in terms of you want to go for something where there isn't a huge amount of complicated reference master data stuff going on as well.
So sort of
it reminds me also and one where it's oh no, this group can't have access to this or that, right? So the app, it's something that kind of everybody can already have access to already somehow.
And I think it's also important to have a really kind of targeted stakeholder. Yeah,
you know what? This is, and I've seen this already with either other people that we work with, other customers and stuff. Is the minimal stuff is going to be the data is people are already access the data, so we don't have to go deal with access controls and stuff like that. So that's one less thing. The second is the semantics, the metadata is clear. There's no, it's already very documented because it's something because so many people go use that. And then I think the third one would be what you just said is the value proposition is so clear. It's people are already getting value out of this through these means, and it's very clear what they're complaining about because they want all this other. So it's you didn't even have to ask them why they it's you hear the complaints all the time oh, why can't we have this, right? So I think three is always a good number. I think maybe is that what are we now defining this new framework for minimal valuable governance?
Maybe. But maybe I'll break the three mold here and ask: is how much does data quality come into the picture? Is that something that we think about in terms of at the in the case of a specific project, or is that more foundational than that?
So yeah, I mean, I guess if you're building something that is based on structured data, then you need to make sure that the outcome is trustworthy, and therefore data quality needs to be sufficient for that to be the case. As one of the reasons why going down the unstructured data route is quite helpful, because again, it doesn't make assumptions about the data quality of structured data.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So one of the things that we talked about, and so in when we gave our talk, when you gave the talk, was about embedded governance and delivery. And then actually somebody in the audience came up later. We both talked, and it was like governance and stealth.
Yes.
No. So talk a little bit about that and your experience about this.
Sure. Yeah. So when I first set up my team at AXIS, I did the organization design as you do, and I thought, right, we've got to have our governance, so we're going to have a separate governance team. And again, I found, as I have done, historically, that governance is really, really difficult to be effective. Again, because if you're going out to people and saying, please, can you do some governance activities, they just are disinterested. And that was a real challenge for me. So in the end, again, I came back to this thought of, we need to incentivize people to do governance based on the outcomes. And kind of through thinking that, I thought, well, why do we have separate governance? Why do we have governance people? Why do we have a data governance team that's off on its own, doing its own thing? Why don't we just bring that into the delivery team? And when somebody is building something or designing something for the business, at that point, they also say, well, you know what, in order to have this is what we need from you. Can you help us to do that? And we bring them in that way. And so in the end, I kind of restructured my team such that now governance just sits within my what I call my data insights pillar, which is essentially the team that go out and work with the business to understand their needs, scope out their requirements, kind of do that translation piece. And that feels like the right point in the process to be asking as well as giving.
So it's actually working directly with the business and in partnership together. And I think you've used the word in the past, like a front office, like make it more of a front office activity versus some kind of a back office or off to the side activity.
Yeah. So it should be right there up front, because there needs to be that kind of clear business engagement. And I want to have that kind of business engagement being a kind of a core function within my team.
I love that. I feel like I'm seeing this across like a lot of folks in the industry. I certainly see it with our own customers at Data.World. Like when folks align governance activities and governance team members directly with the business, and instead of asking more from the outside in, like, oh, hey, what policies do I need to put in place to make sure we're safe overall or something like that, which is obviously important, but it's, you're never going to get the business excited about new policies coming down from in on high, right? But if you say, hey, what are you trying to accomplish right now? And then they say, oh, well, right now we have an initiative around, I'm just going to make something up, like Customer 360, because we're trying to improve our customer service or something like that, right? Then you say, oh, great. Well, what are the data assets that you need in order to accomplish that? Great. Okay, well, these are the ways that I can help you and that you can help us to make sure that this happens faster, achieves the outcome better, and it happens safely, because it's, the brakes are in the car, so that way you can go faster, not so you can stop.
So then let's talk about the team structure around this, because then there is, you have a team, right? They report into you, like you're your chief data officer, but then you are aligning everything with all these business outcomes. So they all end up still reporting to the data, but they're like, in a way, are they all kind of dotted lines out of the business? Like, how are you organizing this team? And then how does that evolve? Because like business kind of needs are going to be changing. So
So I have within my team, I've got a number of different kind of pillars, if you will, and a couple of those are the business aligned ones. So one of the biggest teams within my team is my data insights team, and that one really is about working with the business to understand what insights they want from data, and that's where I have my governance activities as well. And that's kind of structured so that we've got kind of people facing off with different areas of the business, and they become their kind of go-to person and very much the sort of the front door for demand. And when I say demand, I don't mean people asking for specific things. I mean kind of partnering with the business to understand what their needs are and then to create solutions to their problems. So that's kind of the business as usual demand comes in that channel. And then I have another kind of business facing part of my team, which is more innovative in nature. So it's my innovation and analytics team. And that's looking at It's much more kind of proactive, going out and finding, like scoping out, like what could we be doing differently? Where are there opportunities for us to innovate and use different methods, different data sets, like new approaches to things, and where are there problems that we should be focusing at, or where are there things externally that we should be thinking about, and those really are the kind of the two areas that face off with the business. One of the things I will say about that is that it's become one of the reasons why I think those teams are quite effective is because I've actually managed to poach people from the business to be part of those teams as well, and so they already have that great.
And they have that they have with a technical background, or they're partnering with technical.
So they are. I mean, a lot of people that I've poached are actuaries, so they're technical people.
Okay. The insurance industry is really fascinating because I feel that is in a way they're so risk averse, but they're so data driven, but some they're not doing it. But then they have that mindset, but it's like they're not taking advantage of it. So.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I think with actuaries, you've got business knowledge. I mean, I am an actuary, so I talk about them very highly, but business knowledge, and you've got technical knowledge. And so you can speak both languages. And so that's really helpful for me. So I've got a couple of people that have come from business roles, and they are really good at that translation point. And the other great thing is because they've come from business roles, they come with a lot of trust, and they come with a great reputation because people in the business know that they're they're reliable, that they're trustworthy, and that they know what they're doing. So that I think has been a real key to success there.
Just before we go to the back-facing teams, how here's an interesting question. How do you get like parts of the business? Like if you identify somebody who you're like, wow, like this person, I really wish they were on my team. How do you make that happen in a way that doesn't cause distrust or dismay or whatever?
Yeah.
That's a very, very good question.
Politics is important, right?
Yes,
it is.
Right? I mean, where it's happened in the past, it's kind of been a mutual sort of acknowledgement that it would be a good idea, rather than it being a kind of going out and like on poaching expedition. But I mean, I think part of it is making the data analytics team an attractive place to be, so that we're building a reputation where people want to be part of the exciting stuff that we're doing, and that's something that I've been working with my team to try and build out, focusing on kind of our reputation, our sort of marketing of the team itself, I think is important. So there's that piece, and then I did have another one, but it's gone.
Well, I liked your point about working closely with kind of the other leaders to make it more of a mutual thing. Right?
Because at the end of the day, they know that it's not like I'm poaching them, and if I am poaching, you are poaching them, but at the end, the value is still for them, right?
Yes,
right? The value is for them, right? So they should be happy because they're gonna there's these stuff I've been wanting to go do, and you're solving these problems.
And I think there's opportunities for it to go both ways as well, because I think ultimately, when you think about like the skills of the future in the business, we're going to need to have a lot more of the sort of technical data and analytics skills in business roles. So I think there's a huge opportunity for people that sit in a data and analytics organization to learn more about the business, and then for them ultimately to sit in more business-facing roles as well. So I think it shouldn't just be I'm off out poaching to build my team. It should be I'm bringing people in to support the business getting what they need, and I'm also upskilling them with the skills that they need, so that in the future they can potentially go back.
That's a great point. And to that point about like it goes both ways, right? Like sometimes you're bringing parts of the business and those expertises into the centralized function, the data function, and then sometimes as you're trying to federate out and empower people, right? An analyst in the the data insights team might be better placed directly in a certain business unit or something like that. So you can work in both ways.
So it seems like the success of this is because you have those people who can think with both sides of their brains, who are technical, they're actuaries, and but understand the business, which is in many places, is the roles that I've been considering, like I call this the knowledge engineers, right? The knowledge scientists who can understand the business, understand the technical side. In this insurance space, it seems like there's a lot of people who are naturally like that, and in other places, like people like that's a unicorn, like those don't exist. So how much of this do you think is unique to maybe the insurance domain, or it's something that can be applicable or applied to other industries?
I don't think it is unique to insurance, so I don't think it should be anyway. I think that it's just a certain way of thinking, and I think it can be taught. And perhaps it's more, you see it more in people that come from a business background and learn the technical, I don't know. And maybe that's something that we should, as data people, be thinking more about, which is how you bring people in with that business acumen and that business expertise, and then train them up on the more technical side of things.
Yeah, it's come up a few times in our podcast, like how do you, like, is it better to be technical and learn the business? Is it better to be business and learn the technical? And quite frankly, I'm not sure that we have a consistent conclusion around that. I think that we've been kind of seeing it both ways depending on various circumstances.
I think we those people exist in an organization. I think we just need to identify them more, or give them these opportunities, or see like here's exactly right. These are the exciting things that are happening. So I know we want to. There's this team structure is really fascinating. We need to go talk to the back office, but before we go there, I want to talk the innovation part. So I really like. So this is something. Well, I'm biased because that's where I work a lot in innovation. But speak a little bit about like how much innovation is done, and who's part of that team, and how do you balance the balance like. Don't go off into. I mean, how much are you going off in the clouds and thinking about this great thing, or how do you tie that innovation to like it's still very business value, but you're still doing something unique, different. But I still need it. I need to see something. Right?
Yeah. And this is an area that I would say that we are still experimenting with, and so I think it will probably take a while before we've got exactly that formula right. And I don't know if anybody has got that formula exactly right.
And I'll say that when I think this is the first time I'm talking to leaders like you, who are like, oh, we have like a fixed group of people working on innovation, part of the CDAO office. So
I think that's true. I don't remember talking to any of our guests and then be like, oh yeah, I have a innovation group. Like
maybe there's innovation labs, but it's not part of what's happening in CDAO.
Oh, they just haven't brought it up. It's sort of a separate thing.
So anyways, you're the first person. I'm thinking about this right now. You're the first person who's actually brought this up specifically as part of your team structures. That's why I bring this up.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. So the way that it kind of came about is that we had. Within certain business teams, there were a couple of people that were tasked with being innovative. They were called like innovation analytics leads or whatever, but they were business embedded. And actually, when I joined the organization 2 years ago, it was decided that should come into a central function. And really, it's kind of evolved fairly organically because of the people and the way that the things that they know and the things that they think about. And also, interestingly, at that point, obviously, that's the point at which AI was kind of blowing up and getting very exciting. So we then put our data science team ended up growing within that team as well. So that
it was also like a timing and luck time.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's ended up being where we've done all of our experimentation around kind of AI and like proof of concepts and stuff within that team. I don't know if now that's becoming much more of a delivery function. So that kind of takes away from that pure innovation focus. But then it also, because of the people that we've had within that team as well, and because of the knowledge of different business areas that they have, it's kind of directed the research and kind of development that they've done to solve for problems that they understand within the business, rather than being just pure, let's horizon scan, let's see what's out there, and let's just get excited about stuff for stuff's sake. It has been tied to an understanding of how the business works and where there's potential opportunities for us to do stuff differently. Which is the bit that I want to keep. Because I think that's really valuable, but it also is useful to not be tethered to the kind of specific problems of the business, but also start thinking more broadly about opportunities with that business background and that business knowledge, starting to think, well, hang on a second, rather than solving, the current process or the current way of doing things, but there's an opportunity here for us to do things differently, or to integrate this thing that I've heard about over here to do things like in a slightly more revolutionary way.
That's super interesting. Is that team pretty roadmap driven? Is it pretty more like project driven? Like, hey, we're going to try this project out, and then at the end of that, we're going to kind of say, yeah, let's invest more, or like, actually, no, that didn't work out. Like, how do you approach the sort of portfolio management of like what a team like that is working on?
So at the moment, again, it's not roadmap driven at all. It's much more opportunity driven.
Okay.
That's how I describe it. And we've talked about evolving this as well, so that we've talked about starting what we're calling like innovation forums, whereby you end up having people from the business that can also feed into it and say, oh, I've seen this, or I've thought about this, have you thought about this? Let's try and work out how we could do stuff differently. And then potentially having some kind of like prioritization committee or something, whereby the people within the team can then go and flesh it out, build it out a little bit more, and then come back and say, do you think we should work on this thing which feels like a big opportunity, or do you think we should work on this thing that feels like a big opportunity, and then that could potentially drive more prioritization that way. So it's quite loose really at the moment, and I think innovation has to be loose. Like, I don't think you can have innovative innovation if it's roadmap driven.
If you make it too structured, it just becomes another delivery organization.
Exactly. Yeah, and I guess that's where we've got to with the AI delivery. Now it's gone from being, let's do some experimentation. Now we're saying, right, this needs to become robust delivery. We need to put the kind of the frameworks and the practices around it, so it moves kind of away from being an innovation focused thing to being an actual kind of core delivery piece.
Does the innovation analytics group still maintain though? Like, if they build something like that AI application, do they have to maintain it?
So that's at the moment, but that's an evolving space. I mean, I guess it's an evolving space everywhere, right?
Definitely, for sure.
Yeah, that's always an interesting topic, because like when an innovation group builds something and then they have to maintain it, then they start to get pulled in a delivery direction. But also, if you can just innovate on stuff and you don't have to actually pay the consequences of the thing that you've built, then that's also not great either. So not an easy problem.
Yeah, because then you're just building a bunch of stuff, and then it just gets busy work, and
then you saddle it on somebody else, right?
And then at the end, the team doesn't have, like, the team morale will go down. We're doing all this work and nobody's using it, and why am I here, and so forth. So all right, back office.
So we talked about the business front office facing teams. Yeah, how do you approach the back office?
So I've got my business focused teams, and then I've got the kind of builders, if you will, in the background, or the builders and the designers in the background. And so I say in the background, they're not in the background, they are a very, very important part of my team. Everybody's very important in my team. So within that, we've got my data architecture team and platforms. So they actually do kind of the building and look after the actual platforms themselves. And then we've got the data quality team as well, who are responsible for like monitoring and like increasing data quality with various tooling and stuff. So those are the kind of core teams. And it's interesting, I know we talked about this on Monday, but when I joined the company, there was not really any data architects. Data architecture was somewhat minimal. And it was one of the first things I asked, which was like, where are the data architects? Because we should be designing this stuff. We shouldn't just be going off and building. And so that's been a really great kind of addition to my team, is kind of building out that architecture function so that we can start thinking about what we're building strategically. So essentially the what and the why comes through the front-facing teams, and then we have the how coming about through architecture, and then we've got like delivery.
I really like that you put an important emphasis on that, because I think that you want this sort of healthy tension between, of course, partner with the business, move fast, like deliver value. But when you do that and you focus on that 100% to the exclusion of everything else, then you start to take on tech debt. You start to create surface area. You make decisions that might bite you later because, now we can't scale to this or that, right? And so you need that like repeatability and that scalability to be balancing that all out.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's incredibly important that we don't just build a load of individual solutions to service individual needs, but we're thinking about that kind of strategic, scalable foundations, and building things with the right design principles, so that we end up with a really coherent strategic data estate.
This is a great quote. So I'm paraphrasing here. The what and the why comes from the front office. The how comes from that back office. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic way of thinking about this. When you have it's always a little why, the how, the why, the what, the why, the how, the what, right? But that's how we need to. That's how we can have that division of kind of all the team structures. We saw a lot more to cover. Anything else in the back office you want to talk? Because I also want to get to the Gartner takeaways.
Maybe just before we do the Gartner takeaways, I think one other topic that came up in the talk that you gave at Gartner was around like change management and kind of like, would you have done anything differently? Like, how long did it take to actually kind of roll out and get that buy-in in governance? Like, maybe you can talk just a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it took way longer than I thought, and way longer than I would have hoped, and to the point that you start to think, oh no, this is never going to take effect. So really, I mean, I've been in the role for 2 years, and I would say the first 18 months was hard graft, and felt like I was saying the same things over and over again, and not making progress. And then suddenly, after 18 months of doing lots and lots of communication, I think communication, I would say, through all of this is one of the most important things of all, which is it's building those relationships across the business and communicating very proactively with core business stakeholders. And so being relentless when it came to kind of communication and the relationship building, 18 months in, it's like the penny dropped, and all of a sudden everyone started to say, I get what she's talking about, and I think she might know what she's doing, which, you start to question yourself when you get to that point. And then since then, I would say in the last 6 months, we've had so much more engagement. And it helps that it's right through the organization, right from the executive level all the way down. Well, perhaps actually we probably need to do more work with, kind of the people on the ground, possibly. But by working at that kind of top end of the organization and getting buy-in and getting them to understand the vision, we're now in a really good place where it feels like, we're ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, some folks go, 3 years in a role and don't end up breaking through, right? Obviously, 18 months, you wish it was faster. If you could have a redo on anything, like what would be a way to try to accelerate that, make it happen even faster? Maybe focusing more on the communication, the relationship building, just right at the front, and maybe there's a way that could have happened in 6 to 9 months or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that I probably got to that a bit later than I could have done. So I do think just being right on the front foot with communication, relationship building, and not just talking, but really listening and understanding the needs of the stakeholders, and not going in there thinking I've got to go out there and show that I know what I'm doing when it comes to data, but actually going in there and saying, what do you need? What are your priorities? How can I help? And then being able to translate that into, okay, well, what does that mean for my strategy? Have I got it right? Do I need to pivot it? Do I need to change things or add things in? I think that kind of talking and listening piece is incredibly important. And I mean, the other thing is it took a while to get the team in the right setup and the right people. But by having, I am now incredibly proud of my team. I think I have a really, really great team. I think I have really strong people. And I think that once you've got that in place as well, and they're seen as trusted and they're seen as knowing what they're doing, then you get to a place as well where it's you start to really accelerate that buy-in.
Yeah, I think that's a great point on getting the team set up the right way too, because I think, I talk to a lot of data leaders that, they maybe in their role for 3, 4, 5 years, and they're still trying to get to that team that they wish they had in terms of structure, and like maybe they're missing a skill set and things like that. But it seems like you have like sort of your way that you're trying to structure things, and it's in place, it's operationalized, you're actually able to leverage that.
Well, I think what I'm taking away from here is that because you also have that background in this space, right, that you can empathize a lot more. You actually want to have those conversations, and you are also saying, I want to hear you, I want to listen to you. Like, what are your problems you're going to solve? Because other approaches, people are like, well, here's the latest technology. We need to bring in the latest the cloud data warehouse and do this because that's what everybody else is doing. I'm like, but then people are like, typical tech person bringing their stuff in. And then you kind of take steps back to go start building those relationships, and you have to go. So I see that. All right. Well, you just spent a couple of days at Gartner.
Yes.
What are your Gartner takeaways? You've been attending some talks, talking to a lot of people. What do you see?
So, I mean, I always find it an interesting experience going to these things, partly because you get to speak to lots of different people and hear other people's perspectives, which I often find as valuable as going to all the talks and hearing things through the kind of more formal communications. And I mean, one of the great things I would say that I got from it is kind of validation that I think we're on the right lines. And also you do get that sort of benchmarking experience where you can see where you are relative to others. And I think I felt like we came off favorably, which I would say kind of historically when I've been perhaps has been less so. So that was good. It was really interesting. I went to a couple of things around the, value focused and being focused on business outcomes. And it was amazing how many people, when you, how many data leaders in particular, you talk about business outcomes, and there's still a disconnect. And I think it was, again, kind of validation for me that we're on the right lines, because when we talk about business outcomes, we're talking about business outcomes. We're not saying a business outcome is like increasing data quality was one that came up. It's about the actual business. It's about, making more profit. It's about kind of adding value to the actual business and being aligned with the goals of the business. So I thought that was quite interesting. And it was great that I was at a talk that was about that, because I think that that's so important. But it was interesting kind of hearing where we are relative to others.
Yeah, so for those who are listening and you are saying that a business outcome is having better data quality, no, that's not business. That's not a business outcome. And please, yes, listen to this. Listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
I know, Tim. What are your takeaways
from Gartner?
Yeah,
I just think that we saw this in Orlando. We saw this now at London. There's such a big focus on governance and metadata management and AI readiness of like, hey, we're so excited about AI. And maybe 2 years ago when ChatGPT first came out and we were all just like on the hype train, maybe we were like, oh, this changes everything. Like this data stuff isn't going to matter anymore. The robots are just going to do everything. This focus on like, no, actually the foundations matter more than they ever have before. This is actually, for any of the problems that we have, this just shines a magnifying glass and amplifies all of it. Like that to me just felt like a theme across kind of all the sessions, regardless of what topic it was kind of going into.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. It was interesting because I think this time round, it was much more cohesive. Like a lot of the things that were being talked about sort of referenced other things within the kind of data organization, which is interesting. And I think that really is exactly what.
Yeah, it's a more connected perspective on those foundations as well.
Yeah, I think even I compared to Orlando just a couple months ago, Orlando was much more about data governance, and this is the next thing. Like I think my LinkedIn post was like data governance is cool now. It's cool now, but I think now it's like it's not just about data governance. It's kind of about everything now connected with AI and AI ready data. And at the end of the day, my main takeaway is like we were talking about this the other day is like we're still repeating the same thing over and over again. Like we got to drive business value, and it's kind of sad that we have to keep repeating this stuff, but it's super, super important. That I think there's still people who are not getting it. So I think that's one stuff. I did see more now about agents and things around agents. And I think actually in the last couple of months, this has already been pushing. So I'm seeing more of that conversation. And I think it's very clear that metadata semantics, that's now kind of a given. Like that's something that you must need to make that investment. That's why governance is now part of it. You're not going to have any of this AI without semantics and metadata investment in knowledge. I mean, knowledge graph continues to be like a big thing all over the place. So it's more of the validation over kind of what's happening. But I think now we're seeing more of that. I feel like we're getting a little bit more mature on how to actually set up these frameworks and do things. So now it's time to rubber hits the road and show us the business values.
Yeah. I agree with that. I actually really hope that, I think the last couple of years, other than data mesh, which I think got a pretty big spotlight about 3 years ago, we haven't been talking too much about like architectures. Like we've swung a little bit more into capabilities and foundations and things like that. I actually hope we continue on that for a little longer, right? I don't need the new lake house architecture, right?
That's not the discussion here.
We kind of have the right architectures we need and the technologies, and like let's just implement them. Rubber hits the road, right?
And also a lot of the conversations I had with folks was a lot about the people aspect too. It's like the behavioral changes that we need to go do, right? And I think that's I mean, we had our honest no BS dinner last night, and a lot of our discussion we had was about like people are complicated and actually how to deal with an older generation who has all this know-how, who are going to be retiring, and sometimes they don't. They're still 10 years in. They still have 10 more years in their job. And like I'm not sharing you that deck. Like that's important. And then you have Gen Zs who are kind of eager to hit the ground running, and they're going to go using AI for things, and they're also jumping around. So there's like this. There's a lot of kind of we're in this interesting kind of generational change, and AI is going to make it really interesting. All right, Tim. Any final words? We're ready to go to the lightning round. I know people know that we're just. Well, you see them on my phone. I'm taking. Tim's taking most of the notes, but
taking notes, making lightning. No, I think we covered a lot here. So why don't we jump to the lightning round?
All right, I'll kick it off. You said data quality is not a business outcome. Is AI readiness a business outcome?
No.
Just wanted to confirm. No. Well, I mean,
I was thinking, is this a trick question? But no, it's not a business outcome.
I think that's great. Yeah, I think there's a lot of folks talking about AI readiness right now, like it's a business outcome.
Exactly. I mean, now data quality is not part of the AI readiness. I mean, I would not be surprised if in the next video you go, it's like, I'm trying to have AI ready data as my business outcome. Like, no.
Right.
All right. So second question, what is the potential impact on the insurance industry with AI in the next 12 months? And I'm going to give you a multi-select here.
Okay.
Medium, high, or very high?
Oh, I can't just answer with one word. I've got lots to say.
Feel free to add a little to it if you want.
I think the potential is high,
Mhm.
but the likelihood of realizing that potential is not so high because there's a lot of work involved to get us to a place where we can get to that potential. So in the next 12 months, if you were to say over the next 5 years, then I would say very high.
Yeah, because that potential can be, the challenges can be worked through, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But 12 months, that's tough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the market is realizing that governance is critical to make AI possible and valuable. Therefore, we should be seeing an increased investment in that, putting your money where your mouth is. Are companies increasing their investment in governance?
No. I don't know. I don't think so. I think you have to prove it before you get that investment.
So you have to have some MVGs.
MVGs. Yeah, we need some MVGs before we get that investment.
Okay. All right, fourth question.
But by the way, this MVG segment, I think is this was a big.
Yeah, I like that.
This was a
useful perspective. All right, fourth question. With AI becoming such a big thing, are you seeing an imbalance in people skills right now? Like, let me be more specific, in the skills that people have right now.
In terms of technical versus non-technical.
In terms of technical versus non-technical, and versus even being able to keep up with the technology.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there is a bigger differential between the people that are willing to spend lots of time researching and exploring and understanding how the world is changing, and those that just sort of sit and move slowly. So you start to see people differentiating themselves a lot more if they are, listening to podcasts and reading and going to events and things, and they're really starting to differentiate themselves. Yeah, I
think that's a really good point. Yeah, people are approaching this technology differently with some people are a lot more willing to open the aperture, some less so.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they were telling me like, oh yeah, AI, and I thought we were on the same page, and then they said, oh yeah, I tried ChatGPT and I asked this question and it didn't do a very good job, so I don't know about all this. And I was like, you don't know about all this? And I was like, whoa, we're on very different pages here, right? And so, it's interesting to see some people are adopting it quickly. Some are a little bit more cautious.
Yeah.
All right, Tim, takeaway times.
All right. Well, we kicked off with how do you make governance an incentive for enablement and AI? Governance has a bad reputation, you said, just historically speaking, the brand it has. You give somebody the title of data steward and they want to run away. They want to run a mile, right? And it's perceived as sort of a dull role, as a chore, but AI can be the carrot. And perhaps our messaging is wrong when we say we need to do governance, right? Oh, we got to do some governance. Instead, it's, hey, you want this shiny thing, this value that we can achieve. In order to do that, here's what we need to do. Here's what we need from you. Then you need to contribute to this. And it puts it in an entirely new framing. And I think that's super important. And that's the way that you're going to get traction, both with your AI projects, but also with governance and data management more at large. And actually at Gartner, they talked about kale and chocolate, right? And I thought that it connected perfectly to some of the stuff that you're talking about. That hey, you're more willing to eat the kale if you know that there's chocolate at the end of it, right? What are some examples that you see of this kind of playing out? So you gave an example of the initial use case where, for underwriting, right? You saw this opportunity partnering with the business where they said, hey, like, look, we're spending all this time looking through hundreds of pages of documents. If we could take that process and make it faster, then that would just have such a big impact and it would create excitement. And so you put that application out there, people got access to it. They saw the value, and it opened up, well, what are we going to do next, right? Here's the next kinds of questions that we want to ask. In order to ask those kinds of questions, we need to have governance. We need to have well-governed data. We need stewardship from the business. And so it creates this momentum. So these low-hanging fruits are really important, which ties into the topic that we sort of coined here together around minimum valuable governance, which is what is the minimal governance that you need in order to achieve a certain value around data. It needs to have a clear value proposition. It needs to engage specific end users. It needs to have minimum complexity. And if you can identify some of these projects early on that have big impact and don't require a ton of governance to achieve, then you can start to get some momentum. And so this lens of minimum valuable governance, I think, is really useful as you think about how you do these different projects. And then embedded governance, right? Embedded governance is something that you've implemented where you're really partnering with the business, and governance is much more of a front-facing activity. And that seems to be something that really allows you to make sure that you're focused on the valuable things that the business sees as valuable, and has allowed you to really build more traction. And somebody yesterday was talking to Juan and myself and said stealth governance, and it's kind of this way to build that buy-in and that partnership and make progress. Juan, what about you? What were your takeaways?
We talked a lot about team structures, and I really love that we go into this a lot, because I think during your talk, that was one of the parts that was really interesting. You talk about the business, the front facing, and the back, and kind of the back office. You have like those two sides, the data insights. You work with the business to understand what they need to do around data. You partner with them, right? The front door of demand of business support. And that's where the governance lives right there. And you also have this innovation analytics space, which is really proactively to scope out the areas where you can do things differently. And it's still kind of very early on experimenting, like figure out that dial, like how much of it is like bleeding edge, pie in the sky, or it's pretty grounded. And it's where you're doing a lot of the POCs, and those priorities are very opportunity driven. I like some hot tips that you gave here. So you may be able to bring some folks from the business in that are technical, who understand the business deeply, who can speak those both languages. But how do you kind of manage creating any bad tensions with them, right? Well, first of all, make data analytics teams, right, the great place to be. At the end of the day, you're also working closer with the leaders on the business side, and it's a mutual benefit aspect right there. And then on the back office, kind of the builders and designers, like you have those data architects and the platform teams, and they're working together. You can have that push and pull because people want to go build things, but you also want to make sure that they're designing things and it's something that's going to be scalable. This is where the data quality and the monitoring and the testing comes in. What and the why comes from the front office. The how comes from the back office. I really love that quote. Change management. Communication is the key. You've got to be relentless around that. Relationship building. And these are the things you have to do right away. And not just talk. You have to be really listening. Don't worry too much about showing that you know what you're doing, that you are the data expert. Like, ask what the priorities are and how you can help. And be ready to pivot and to adjust. And getting the team in the right setup is key. And then finally, just for Gartner, we're talking about where the advantage of going to places like Gartner is that you get those other perspectives, not just from going to talks, but just meeting with your peers and your colleagues. You get validation. You can benchmark yourself around that. And this conversation has always been about, right now, the theme is everything is value focused. It seems that there's still people who are a little bit disconnected, right? Increasing your data quality is not a business outcome. Having AI-ready data is not your business outcome. A lot of conversations about AI-ready data for sure, but I think we're now seeing more of this cohesive conversations. All right, how did we do?
That was good. Yeah, I think you summarized it very well.
All right, well, that was all you, so
great.
Thank you. All right, to wrap up, 3 questions. What's your advice? Who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow? So,
advice is, I would say that go back to the communication thing, that if you're going to add value to the business, you have to know the business and you have to build relationships with them. So to me, that is the most important thing on this journey. In terms of who you should have next, I would say I'd follow on with that theme and say you should get somebody that isn't necessarily in data, but with that business lens, because it could be quite interesting to talk to them about how they perceive data, how they could use data, and just kind of understand it from that different perspective. I don't know if you, I mean, I haven't seen you do that much before, so it could be an interesting one.
Yeah, maybe even somebody from a specific industry like insurance, and what's their, what are their needs around data, things like that.
And what was the last
And
one?
what resources you follow?
Resources you follow.
So I'm a bit random, to be honest. I wait for recommendations, and I don't have anything specific, but I go after things that that people have recommended to me.
Yeah.
So it's a bit sporadic.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for one. I know you have been listening to our podcast for a long time.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for being a loyal listener, and thank you for spending time today for our 5 years, for also speaking with us, being a speaker with us at Gartner. And thanks for everybody who's just listening here. We've got over 30 people just live right now, plus the thousands of people. We get 10,000 plays every month now.
And
so
it's been an incredible journey. I can't believe that it's been 5 years. It really, truly shows how old we're getting. But we're going to be hanging out with our friends here.
Yeah, if you're actually listening
London.
live in London, come right now upstairs to the Cocktail Gun. We're next to the bank station, and then let's go have a drink. And it's a beautiful day in London right now.
And one quick special shout out to Ben Clinch.
Yes,
who
a former guest.
Is a former guest, right? And brought us these wonderful drinks and shared with us.
And even the glasses.
And the glasses themselves, and also this wonderful office space with Orteca that we could hang out in. So thanks, Ben. And thanks, Rebecca. This has been great.
And happy anniversary.
Thank you
very much.
Cheers, everyone.